All right, everybody. So last class I was showing how to begin to model a table, and we're going to kind of uh, show another technique on modeling the rest of the table there. So very brief recap of what we did last class is, remember, we set up a project, which is that three-step phase. So we created that project directory. So I have it on my desktop here. And remember, you have to go through the steps to get all these folders that are in there. And there's a reason to have all these folders in there, which is, again, Maya sourcing this stuff as it's working. And if you remember, we used a reference image, which was this reference image right here, to model this demo table right here. And if it needs to be in the source images folder, and if you kind of bring it in from another area of your computer, much of the time, like the next time you open it, like today, if you open it and your image is kind of in a different place, a lot of the time it'll be missing this time around. So kind of Maya's looking in this folder structure for any components that you might have that you're trying to work with here. So we showed how to import that into your scene. And for anyone who needs a reminder on how to import your reference images in, just real briefly, you just go to the 4-view mode right here by pressing this button right here. And then to import an image, remember, you don't want to import your reference image into your perspective view. If you do that, it'll go something like this, where when you're rotating your scene around, your image will be kind of like landlocked in the middle of there, which is not really what you want for this, because we want to trace it. So you want to go to the 4-view mode by pressing this button, go to the front view right here, and then we click this button right here, which is, I think, the 5th from the left at the top, and it should say image plane when you hold your cursor over it. Additionally, you can go to view image plane and then import image right there. So both of those do the exact same thing right there. So we just press this button right here, find your table image, open it up, and then we have it in reference view right there. You remember, you need to kind of move it out of the way a little bit before you start working. And then we created a cylinder and we started working from there. Let's see here. So when I was modeling, something that I really like to do a lot of the time when I'm modeling is I'll go to 2-view like this. So I have my my front view right there on the left side of the screen, and then my perspective view on the right side. And if this isn't showing the front view right there, you can change the perspective by going up to the panels tab up here, orthographic, and you can change it to like the side, the top, or whatever you need it to be right here. So panels, orthographic, and then front right here. Another thing that I did here to help set this up is I changed this to my orthographic view to be in X-ray mode. You could also set it to be in wireframe mode. So wireframe mode, you just hold your cursor over and press 4. And so that way you can see your model through, see through your model and see your reference image. Press 5 to go back to shaded. Or you can go to X-ray mode, which is, you can go up to press this button right here to go to X-ray mode, right there. Or you can go to shading and then go down to X-ray. So you can go right above that import image button right there, go to shading, and then go to X-ray. And so that way we can see through it. We have the model, and just make sure your model is showing up in front of your orthographic reference image. So if my reference image is in front of it, you'll see that in my orthographic view, I can't see my model anymore. So just, if you can't see your model in your orthographic front view, just remember you can move it back, your reference image back, and that way we can see it again. And essentially, when we're modeling this, just to kind of briefly recap, I started this out by going into the attribute editor and going to the 3rd tab over, polycylinder 1, and I made sure to give this a couple caps here, because remember, if I only have 1 cap, which is the default, when I press 3, I get a pumpkin shape right here. So just give it a couple caps right here. I usually like to give it 3. And so that way, when I press 3, it comes out looking correct right there. And additionally, setting this up, I like to give this a subdivision axis that's divisible by 4. And you can kind of choose virtually any number you want. I think for the demo, I might have done something like 24. You could set it all the way up to 40. It just kind of depends on your taste on that. And from there, just to kind of show what I was doing, I modeled it from the top all the way down to the bottom right there. And remember, one of the main parts of the technique I was doing is I was right clicking, going to face mode, and notice how I'm working mainly in the orthographic view here. I'm barely using the perspective view at all right here. So I'm just, if I want to select the bottom faces at the bottom of my cylinder down here, instead of trying to kind of select them manually down here, which can be a little bit cumbersome, the technique I was showing is you right click, go to face mode, you drag and select. So I'm in the bottom corner right here. I drag and select. Oops, make sure you're in face mode. So I click right here, drag and select up to this point right here. And so you'll see some of the side faces get selected, but remember, if you hold down Control, you get the deselect option. So I just hold Control, and then I just drag right through the middle like this, and I deselect those faces. And so now I'm working with only the bottom faces selected right there, and I can kind of begin modeling this thing. And so I'm not going to do this whole thing right now, but to kind of start this off, I had all my faces selected. Go to the modeling toolkit. You press extrude with those faces, and make sure to, I'm only doing 2 controls for this whole thing, and I'm just keeping it. You can do this entirely from the front orthographic view, where you're just doing the blue arrow down. Then you press the scale button, or you press R on your keyboard. And then this is really important that you do the uniform scale so that it scales uniformly in all directions. And then from there, you might press W or press this move tool to make adjustments. So W, R, and just kind of continue to make adjustments to it right here. And you can press F in this view, so you frame it up right here. And so I have all my faces selected right there. I'm just repeating those steps again and again. So blue arrow down for the extrusion right there. Press Q to get done with it. If I want to do a hard bevel in, extrude, R, scale it in. You can see it scale in directly in when I do it. When I just when I extrude, and then I directly press R and just scale it uniformly in like that. And it's actually a really quick process once you get the hang of it right here, where you're just doing it one step at a time right there. So that brings us to, so you just kind of repeat those steps right there. And that brings us to, let me kind of go back to my saved version from last class. So we got it right here. I'm not going to save. Okay, so this kind of brings us to what we ended up with last class. Remember, so I modeled it like that. And then when you press 3, it smooths it out for you right there. Some additional techniques I was showing to help you kind of fine tune it is, remember, when you look at this model, when I press 3, the areas that have more geometry close together create these hard ridges right here. So you can see right here in the perspective view, I have these really, like, the hard ridges right there and right there. And the reason for that is I have a lot of geometry really close together in those regions right there. You can kind of see it. And the areas where it's smoother and a little more gradual, there's less geometry in there. And so when I initially modeled it, I had really low geometry on this model right here. And then to fine tune it, I just selected edge loop. So right click an edge loop, and then you can select an edge loop, and you can go to the bevel button. And when you create a bevel, you can make adjustments to it, and you create some denser geometry in these regions right here. So you can kind of, where this was really smooth and rounded out before, I created a bevel right there. And now when I create that bevel and I press 3, and let me get off of the wireframe mode, you can see that it's now got a hard ridge right there instead of being gradual right there. So that's one way. And within this modeling technique, you can begin to add more geometry into your scene. And a bevel is only really helpful to create what is named a bevel. So there's another technique. So let me just press edit and undo to kind of bring it back to where it was. So that's it, with more rounded gradual geometry right there. So another technique to add more geometry into an area is the multi-cut tool. So the multi-cut tool, if you remember, is I'm in objects mode right now, and I press multi-cut. And by default, you have this tool where you can, like, manually draw in geometry, which I really don't want y'all to get into yet, because there's more information you need before you can start using this tool properly. If you use it now, it'll turn into a little bit of a mess because there's just some information I haven't given you yet. But if you hold Control on the keyboard, it creates edge loops. And so you can see as I'm holding it, so I'm holding down Control and I'm holding it over these vertical edges, it's creating horizontal edge loops. And then if I hold it, it just creates an edge loop perpendicular to the edge that you're holding it right here. So if I want an edge loop right here, all I need to do is just, I'm holding down Control and I click and then it adds it. And then from there, I just press Q to get away from the tool so I don't add geometry by mistake. Then I go to edge mode and then I just double click that edge and that selects that entire edge loop right there. You can see that just that edge loop right there is selected right there just by double clicking on any edge right there. And from there, I can press R and scale it or scale it in a little bit. And you can make adjustments to it. And remember, you can press 3 to kind of get a preview of what it's going to do when you let it go right there. And so those are all the tools that were introduced right there. And so that kind of brings us to today. Oh, one last thing I want to say about that last class is if you look at my table right here, if in objects mode, you can see that I have like some hard edges up here at the top. And the bottom is supposed to be a little rounded, so I didn't do it too much at the bottom. But remember that if you want a hard edge rather than something really rounded, to create a bevel up at this top edge right here, or use that multi-cut tool. And again, the denser the geometry, the harder the edge is going to be. So initially this was super rounded off at the top. And you can see it's got more of like a hard top right there. And that's because I selected that edge loop and I beveled it and gave it just a few subdivisions right there. So that's what we modeled last class. And one thing that I did that I wish that I didn't is while y'all were working, I kind of went ahead and started just to kind of work ahead a little bit as I started modeling the top of the table right here. And so one thing I didn't say before I did that, because it was just kind of I was doing it on the side, is notice that this is one piece of geometry. And I'm going to make a whole, and I named it column right here. And for the tabletop, what I recommend doing is making a whole different piece of geometry for it, like a new model. Like start fresh with a new model and don't try to extrude these faces up here that are, you know, at the top of your model right here. Instead, just start with a new model. Yes. It's not the end of the world. Yeah, not the end of the world. It can so that's a good thing. If you did do it, it's probably not a problem. It's just more of just I wanted to kind of introduce the concept that it's okay to kind of model with different objects, and then we can group them together after the fact. And the general philosophy that I would encourage you to kind of think about with it is especially if you're going to texture the objects, if it's just like the same uniform plastic material without a texture on it, you can't just get away with grouping a ton of objects together. But when you're modeling a table, and you can see we have a wood grain on this texture that you might eventually kind of put onto this thing, is think to yourself, like the carpenter or the manufacturer who's creating the object that you're modeling, how many parts did they use to make it, right? So if this was a table in real life, this would be essentially one block of wood. I'm not a carpenter, but you know, just kind of generally guessing. This would be one block of wood, and then we would kind of be using different materials for this top part. So to kind of construct this table overall, what I would end up doing is I would make one object right here for the column, and I would name it over here. I would make another object right here for the top. And for the top, we're going to use the exact same technique, just, you know, as a different model. And then we have these 3 legs down here, maybe 4, where we're going to use a different technique, which I'm going to show next today here. But before we go to the legs, I'm just going to quickly model the tabletop right here. So just to get like one more quick practice round on the same technique right here that we're using for this. Since the table is a bit bigger, I might go with a higher subdivision level for this one, just to start with. So I'm just gonna start this off with a cylinder right here. And so I'm gonna start modeling the tabletop right here. And one technique that let's see here, that I'm going to do here is similar to what we're doing last time, which is I'm going to go to the attribute editor, go over here. First step is mess with the sliders here. So I want to give it some caps. So we're going to go 2 caps on this. For the subdivision axis, I'm going to go with more subdivisions on this because it's a wider radius item. So there's more geometry that's going to need to happen to remove the facets. And then I'm going to scale it in. And one good technique right here is you can just scale this all uniformly and then just scale it down like this. But if you're feeling fancy and you want to kind of keep it the same vertical, you can hold control while scaling it. And you can see it's scaling out uniformly in the X and the Z axis, but it's not changing in the Y axis. So I'm holding control for that. But that might be a little, don't worry about that one too much because you don't really need that technique. So I'm just scaling it uniformly and then just scaling it in with the vertical. And I'm going to model this one from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to start right here, press W, bring it in. And I'm just going to line this up. So I'm just zooming in. Remember with the orthographic view, you can hold Option and we're using the middle mouse button, and we're using the right click, drag left and right to kind of find your items. And also you have F, which can frame it up. And you can really kind of get a good look at your models here in the orthographic view just by using those controls properly right here. So I'm not going to go into like, exquisite detail on this particular model. I'm just going to kind of execute the technique one more time, just so for anyone who's feeling a little rusty on it can try it again. So I have, I'm modeling this initial ledge right there. And I'm going to right click, go to faces. I'm going to drag and select. So I'm starting in the top corner this time. So right click face, drag like that. And you can see that we're getting the top, but we're also getting the sides. So to deselect the sides, just hold down Control and drag and select like this to deselect that. And so now we have just the top of the table selected right there. And so we'll just kind of start doing the same technique right here. So I'm going to extrude. And this time I'm going to press R and scale uniformly from the center just to bring it straight in like that. I'll press Q, press extrude again, blue arrow up, press Q, extrude again, pressing R, and then scaling uniformly like that. You'll see some zebras, but that's okay right here. And then I'll extrude one more time, blue arrow. And it's a little hard to see what's happening on that top ridge, but I'm just going to extrude one more time, bring it up, and then R, scale it in uniformly right there. So it's a couple of really quick kind of extrusions happening right there. And now I want to do some beveling on this. So we have this model that looks like this. When I press 3, it kind of looks okay without smoothing, but then when I smooth it, it's going to turn like a little bit like a cookie or something. So I'm going to press 1, and I'm going to add some bevels in this to help just define this a little bit better. And in the past, we've been beveling using edges, which is a good way to do it. And I think we're going to just keep going that way, just because beveling faces can be a little confusing sometimes. So what I'm going to do is, remember, you can bevel multiple edges at the same time, if multiple edge loops at the same time. So I'm going to double click that edge right here that's going along the bottom edge. And let me look at my reference just to see how that bevel should be looking. Okay, so I'll shift and select this edge right there. So just kind of zooming in on it a little bit, where at the bottom, and I'm selecting that edge right there, and then that edge right there, going all the way around. I'll press 4 so you can kind of see where it is a little bit better. And again, you're just double clicking to select an edge loop. Then I'll press bevel. I'm going to switch over to my orthographic view so I can see my reference just a little bit better, even though it's blurry. And make some adjustments to it. And so one thing that's nice here is just to kind of expand on some of what we talked about last class, is if I press 3 right here, I can see what that bevel is kind of looking like right now. You can see I haven't beveled above it. So this is still soft looking. But one thing that's really nice about Maya is, I don't know if y'all remember me saying this, but there's that control, and do not click this right now. So don't click what I'm about to show you, but just notice it, is the edit delete by type history. I've shown you that is sometimes if your model gets a little bit cumbersome, it's because of storing your modeling history as you go. And so sometimes that can slow your computer down. And the advantage of it is it saves my bevels in here that I'm going. So as I'm going along. So you see that bevel that I just made there? So all I've done so far is I've created this the top object right here. I've extruded it out, and then I've created that one bevel right there. So if you want to make an adjustment to your bevel after the fact, so I clicked bevel and the menu's gone. So it's like, how do I adjust this after this point? And so the way you adjust it is you do not delete the history, and you go to the attribute editor. And remember, the third tab is where we were changing, or initially the third tab was where we were changing the subdivisions and things like that. But each of these tabs is your steps in your modeling process. And you can click these arrows and kind of move through. So you can see when I initially created my object here, this is my first extrusion right there. And as I go left, you can see more of my scales and extrusions happening right here. And then if we go back towards the beginning right here, so you just look for the soonest one that says bevel on it, which is right here. And you can see the sliders are right there. And so if I want to make adjustments to my bevel after the fact, I can add more segments into it here using the slider in my attribute editor. So you just have to find the bevel you're looking for. And remember that the most recent things appear to the left. So the poly bevel is right here. So I can add more subdivisions, less subdivisions, and change the fraction, just kind of continue to adjust it here. So that can be really helpful all the time as you're wanting to kind of make small adjustments and tweak what you've been doing. So I've beveled both the upper and lower edge on that one. I'm going to do a similar thing. I need to just kind of keep beveling here. So I'm going to double click this edge right here, hold shift, double click that edge up top, and we're going to create another bevel that kind of creates this going around. If this was an Oreo, like going around the white of the Oreo right there. So I'll press 4 so you can kind of see. It's a little hard to make it so it's visible. But it's this edge right here, and then this edge right there where it's highlighted green right there. And I'm going to create a type bevel for that as well, because looking at this model right here, it's a really abrupt bevel you can see right there in the reference image. So I'm going to go to the modeling toolkit again, bevel, and I'm going to make the fraction really small, maybe 0.1, give it two segments right here, and then press Q to get out of it. And from here, I can press 3, and you can see now I have a hard edge right there, less hard edge, but more or less on these lower sides. And so and I also have it for the top up here. You remember I selected as an edge mode, and I did it for this edge right here. And then I did it again for this edge up here. So now we're kind of getting close on this thing. So there's another hard edge if we look at the reference at the bottom of this. So I'm going to press 1 on my keyboard to go back to regular modeling view. Double click that edge right there. So we're going to create another bevel to just kind of create a little more definition in that edge. So bevel. I'm going to do 0.2 this time, and I'll do 2 segments again, because remember, we're going to smooth it. So that's going to double the subdivisions. And so now when I press 3, we have another relatively hard edge right there. And this thing's kind of starting to come together a little bit. This edge right here, remember, if I want to make adjustments to this edge that I just created, or this bevel that I just created right there, is I just go to the attribute editor with this model selected, and then I look, that's the most recent bevel that I've created. So it's going to be the bevel that's the furthest to the left in the attribute editor. And if I want to make, give it more subdivisions, make it smaller right here and give it a harder edge, I can make that adjustment right here. So we're pretty much almost done with this top part. I think I observed that there's a little bit of like some sort of like, I can't really make out what's happening right there because it's so grainy. but it looks like there's some kind of bevel happening right there. I can't quite tell. So I am just gonna do that real quick, just to add one more level. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to face mode, select these upper faces right here. And here I might have to manually, so if you want to deselect an edge loop of faces right here, I'm just holding control and then I'm double clicking a face right here and it's going to deselect any faces along this ring right here. So I selected all the faces on the top of the table right there just by going into face mode, dragging and selecting right here and letting go. And this is more faces than I want to select. I don't want these faces right here that I'm highlighting selected. So to deselect those faces, you just hold down control and you just double click oh, I messed it up. Let's say double click. Oh my gosh, really? I was just doing it. Okay, sometimes it just doesn't do it. Okay, now it's doing it. So it's a little finicky. You can see that I was holding control and double clicking and everything was getting deselected. And then I held control again and did it in a slightly different spot and it did deselect it. So just keep in mind that's a little bit of a finicky control, but you can sometimes deselect face loops kind of going around here. And what I need to do is there's just a little bit of a lip right here that I noticed that I need to create. So this is kind of that part of the process where you're just trying to observe the model and kind of come as close as you can to it. So I just selected those faces, extruding, made to make sure I'm in one mode or else that can be really deceiving what's happening. So I just doing the blue arrow up, R button, just scaling it in ever so slightly because it's a really small ridge that's happening right there. And then go back to objects mode and press 3. So I can see that ridge starting to take place right there that I think I'm seeing in the table. So again, what I'm looking at is if I'm looking at this table right here, I'm looking at like this little ridge right there that I think I'm seeing. So let me bring this back. And so what I need to do now to help just define that ridge a little bit, I'm going to select this edge loop that's right there. It's this not the top one, but the second one down. And then I'm just going to bevel it again and make some small adjustments to it right there. And I think I'm starting to kind of get a ridge forming here. Let's see here. Oops. I don't know. Okay, so I'm having a little trouble with it. So what I'm going to do is I have the bevel created. I'm going back to objects mode, going back to the attribute editor, finding that most recent bevel, and I'm going to just try to make adjustments to it here. And I find that the orthographic view can be a good place to get a good view of what you're trying to do if you're having trouble seeing it right here, especially on the smaller stuff. So, yeah, that's not looking quite right. Okay, so I'm just going to press edit undo a few times to kind of get out of it. There we go. All right, so I'm back to where I have that ridge. And I'm gonna, I tried to bevel this line and that didn't quite work. So I'm gonna double click this edge and now I'm gonna bevel this one. So that's the top edge in the modeling toolkit, bevel, and I'll make some adjustments. And from there, press 3. And now we got it right there. And so what I had there for that bevel is I set, so again, I selected the absolute, I kind of messed up the first time and I tried this edge and that didn't quite look right to me. So I had to just press edit undo to kind of get out of it. And then I went up to this edge right here and I beveled that one and created just a 1 segment bevel right there. There's approximately this size right here, which is in my case, a fraction of 0.1. And so now what we have here, when I select this top model right here is when I press 3, I have a table with a little bit of like an upper lip bevel right there, and then kind of defined edges that are still kind of nicely rounded off, hopefully, for these lower components right here. So let's see here. So I'm just gonna be sure to save your work too as you're making progress here. So I like to save incrementally. I tend to do it by like what day I'm doing it. So table version 1 right here, which I saved in my scenes folder, was what I did on day 1. Table version 2 is what I'm doing on day 2. And I just kind of save incrementally as I work here. And so that way, if something gets corrupted in here, I don't lose all my work. So I have that saved. And so again, everything that I did in this top table technique is the exact same as what I was doing down here. And I bet a lot of you probably already kind of started modeling this up here as well. But I just wanted to kind of give time to review, because this is a really important set of techniques. And so it's good just to kind of get it solidly in there kind of mentally. So everyone give it, I'll give you all some time to work, and I'll come around and answer any questions y'all might have. And when we kind of get back from that, I'll start showing how to model these legs right here, which is a totally different technique we're going to do down there for that. So again, just try to give this a shot, and be sure to save your work. And if you have any questions, just flag me down in the chat. I have the chat window open for all of you online. So just hit me up in the chat if you have any questions or want to share a screen. And I'll start this off by kind of going around the class here for the in-person. All right, everyone. So picking this back up. So what I'm going to do now is I have the column, which I named right here in my outliner. And remember, the outliner, you can usually find it right there. And if it's not there, Windows and outliner right there. And I have the top right here. And so right now it's called P cylinder 3, and I'll just double click it and just name it top or something like that, just so that we're, oops, I'll call it table top. Just so I can kind of keep this organized here. And so something that I'll go ahead and kind of introduce here is grouping objects right here. So right now we have a tabletop and then a bottom right here. And so if I wanted to physically move this table, I could just hold down select or drag and select and kind of move it all around like that. But sometimes, especially when you start to make more complicated objects, like for instance, imagine you're modeling a car where you're going to have like, 45 parts or something on there. This can become a lot when you have like a whole scene going around your object. And so to get around that, we're going to group it. And so all you need to do to group something, there's not really a button for it that I'm aware of, but the shortcut for it is you just select the objects that you want to group, and you can either select them over here by holding down Command or Control and selecting them this way. So I'm holding down Command on my keyboard, 1, 2, or just in your perspective view, just drag and select both of them right there. And then you just press Command and G. G is in group. And then so Command G, and you can see it creates a group right there. And it's just an organizational tool that you can use to kind of keep the outliner clean. So I'll double click the group and name it table group right there. And you can see the group, it's got a group will always have that little icon. It's a red arrow next to a diagonal white box right there with a little plus next to it. And so one thing that's nice about a group is you can press the plus button and you can see your items that are within your group right there. And I would recommend not getting too overzealous with the amount of things you put in a group, so for instance, I would just kind of put a table in a group, instead of putting like your whole scene in a group, if that makes sense, just kind of like one set of items per group is usually best. But one thing that's nice about a group here is instead of having to drag and select or hold shift and select the different objects to kind of move this around as one entity, is I can just go over to my outliner, press the group, and then you can see these move controls show up right here, and I can just move it all at once right there, or I can scale it and it stays together right here. So you see how when I'm scaling it, that the whole object is remaining intact right there since it's in a group. If I don't group it, so let's just, I'm going to remove these from the group just by, dragging them out of the group and then deleting the group right here. is I have the tabletop and the column. If I have them both selected and I scale them, you see how they come apart right there? So I'm scaling it, but they get separated when I scale them right here because they're not grouped right there, even though they're both selected right now. And so a group is kind of helpful for a bunch of reasons, for just kind of keeping like a multifaceted item intact with itself here. So again, dragging and selecting them both and scaling them, it makes it scale out of proportion and it messes up. So the way around that is you just hold shift, select them both, or just drag and select both, press command or control, depending if you're on a Mac or a PC, and G as in group, and then you got your group right there. And again, I'll name it. And now I can, it only works if I select the group and the outliner, but you can select the group and the outliner. I press R and I can scale it and it all stays intact, or I can move it and again, it's all stays intact. And same with rotating, where it all stays as one object right there. So that's one thing that'll be really helpful, particularly as you're creating an environment that's going to get complicated, because when you're creating your room, this outliner is going to start filling up. One thing to also keep in mind here is I kind of recommend just, so when I'm modeling this, I'm going to have a Maya scene that's like for my table. And then I'll have a Maya scene that's for like, if I was modeling like a TV or something, I would have a Maya scene for the TV. And what I recommend doing is just exporting, once you're done modeling these, exporting these into like a larger scene where you have like the rest of your environment here. Because one thing that's nice about modeling this table here is I don't have to worry about like 50 other objects that I'm having to kind of look around and peek around here to kind of see it. I can just kind of concentrate on the table here and have like a clean scene. And then when I'm done, I just make a new scene for the next object, and then I can just it's really easy to export these when they're done into another Maya scene here. So the modeling technique that I was showing for this is kind of like the most common modeling technique that you'll probably end up using here in Maya. And you'd be surprised. I mean, there's not always going to be that much beveling per se, but the concept of extruding faces, like starting with a primitive object and extruding faces and moving faces around and going between 1 and 3 and adding new edge loops is essentially the most common modeling technique that you're going to use here. So it's going to be helpful and applicable here for a ton of different objects. But there's a few core modeling techniques here that I'm going to introduce in this class. And one of the biggest tricks when first learning to model is, as I introduce these techniques, is to kind of figure out, like, when you're looking at an object that you're trying to model, is like, okay, which technique is actually going to be the easiest for me here? Because some of these techniques are better at some things and some things are better at others here. So this next technique is something I'm going to use for the feet right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one foot and then we'll duplicate it 4 times and just rotate it around the table right there. That's kind of the essential plan. But instead of starting off with like a primitive fully formed poly object right here, I'm going to do a technique that I use I start with a plane and then I extrude out. So I extrude out a plane, like a flat paper like object, and then I extrude it out into a 3-dimensional object. And this is actually the technique that I use for this develops into a technique that is really helpful for really complicated things. So for instance, if I were to like model a Lamborghini or something like that, I would use an iteration of this technique that I'm about to show. Incidentally, if I were to model a human, which is really complicated, I might start with essentially a variation of the technique we used for these 2 parts right here. So these techniques kind of seem simple, but they can develop into really complicated things once you kind of get used to them and get comfortable with them here. So what I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to select both of these objects right here, and I'm just going to press H on my keyboard, and that's just going to hide them. It doesn't delete them, so they're still over here in your outliner. And so when you hide something, it's just important to kind of keep track that it's in your outliner over here, because in order to unhide it, you need to find it in your outliner, select them again and press H again right there to bring them back. So that's just a helpful way to kind of get something out of your way if you want it just not visible but not deleted. So again, I can just select the group, press H right there to hide it, and just remember that to find it again, you need to open it, select it again in your outliner right here, press H, and you can bring it back. And so to start this thing off, I'm going to create a plane, and I'm going to model it into this shape right here, and then I'm going to extrude it out into 3 dimensions. So to start off, I am going to be in my 2 view mode right here. And I'm going to press on this plane button right here. So just create a polyplane. So it should be this button right here. If you don't see it, you can go to create poly primitives and go down to plane right there. And so I create a plane, and then I'll press F to focus in on it right here. And this has way too many subdivisions. I actually want this to be really simple here. And so I'm going to go to the attribute editor, go to the 3rd tab of the attribute editor. And similar as before, I'm going to adjust my subdivisions. So it starts off with a subdivision of 10 and 10, and I'm just going to drag that down to 1 and 1 right here. I just want it to be one face right there. And this kind of comes back to one of my core concepts when modeling objects in 3D, which is start simple. Like you want to kind of build out your models as if it's like a Nintendo 64 game almost at first, and then it's really easy to add geometry from there. It's way easier to add than it is to subtract. And so you kind of, it's like painting, you just work with a broad stroke at first, and then you kind of get you don't start off by painting the eyelashes, right? So I have a plane right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees so that it's flat right here. So there's 2 ways you can do that. So in the attribute editor, we're in the 3rd tab right here. I can go back to the 1st tab right here to plane 1. And under rotate, I think it'll be under the 1st one. If I type 90 right here, that'll rotate it by 90 degrees. So again, I was adjusting the subdivisions right here in the 3rd tab. And then I go over to the 1st tab. And I think it'll be rotate right here. Let's try it. There we go. Yep. So rotate 90 degrees right there. And you can see it's flush with the scene right there. So you can do that. Another technique you can do is I could press the rotate tool right here, and then I can hold J as in joystick on my keyboard, and then it snaps it by 15-degree increments right here. And so I can just rotate it until it is at 90 degrees right there. So that'll do the same thing, and you can see it got to 90 right there. So if I'm holding J, you can see it's 75, 60, 45, etc. right here. So those are 2 ways to do the same thing right there. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be working entirely in my front view right here. So I'm not even worried about my perspective view at all. So I'm just going to press W and move my objects into position right here. So I'm just going to move it into position, use the Alt or Option button, and kind of get this into shape right here. And I'm going to be alternating a lot between the vertex mode and the edge mode. And so remember when we created the cyc for the last assignment, I created a plane and then extruded the edges to create the walls. So I created the floor first and then extruded the edges to create the walls. Similar thing right here. So we're going to trace the shape of this, and I'm going to do it with a combination of going between vertex mode and edge mode here. So I'm not worrying about face mode at all for this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, go to vertex mode, and I'm just going to select this, and I'm just kind of tracing the shape a little bit. So I'm bringing that to the top, bringing that to the bottom, remaining in vertex mode. So I'm just clicking this, and I'm going to bring it down to maybe right here, and this somewhere around, let's say right there. So we're just kind of, it's a similar idea, right? We're starting from one end and we're going to extrude and kind of bring ourselves out to the end over here. So I try to follow along and get to that point. So again, I started off with the face, and I right clicked and went into vertex mode right here, and I just manually just moved each vertex right here. And so hopefully it'll kind of be clear why I'm working in such a low resolution at first, because I want less points that I have to worry about right here for this first stage, because this will you can do this real quick if done properly right here. So I get it into this shape right here, and let's see here. Is everyone following along with us so far? Yes. Oh yeah. So the points so you just right click over the object right here and go to vertex mode, and then you just drag and select like this to get each point right here. So I'm just dragging and selecting like that. Clicking on the points is really finicky. Like if you try to click on the points themselves, yeah, Maya can be like, if you try to click on the points, you have to like, see how you just have to be like really exact with it. And what I like to do here is just do it like a zone region right here and select that. And then I'm just pressing W or doing the move tool. And normally I encourage you to use these handles right here, especially when you are in the perspective mode. But when you're in the orthographic mode, it's actually okay to just grab it by the middle right here, because we're only having to worry about moving it in the X and the Y axis, and we don't have to worry about the Z axis getting weird and mucking it up here. So in order for this technique to work, by the way, it's really dependent that we stick to the orthographic views here. So I'm not even messing with the perspective view. It's just not even part of my process for this. I'm just only dealing with this as a flat object right now. So I have my front right here, and I have just this subdivision set right here. And then I'm gonna right click over my object and go to edge mode right here. And you can see this edge that I have highlighted red right there. I'm going to select that edge. And then, so once I have that edge selected, I'm going to go to the modeling toolkit and then extrude from there. So again, just I've initially kind of moved these vertexes or vertices around just to get it into this position. All right, click, go to edge mode, select this edge right there, and then extrude. And then in this case, I'm just going to do so I'm not worrying with any of the boxes. I'm just doing the green arrow and pulling it outward right here. So for me, it's a green arrow, and it's just whatever is perpendicular to the line right there. So it's just green arrow to pull it out, and it can go out anywhere. It's fine. Don't worry about getting it exact or anything like that. I'm just pulling it out real quick just so that it's extended from the initial edge. And then from there, I go back to vertex mode by right clicking over the object, going to vertex mode, and just pressing W, and I'm selecting these vertices and just kind of moving them into position like this. So I'm going to continue that and trace this object along like this. So yeah, continue to follow along with that. And so I'll just kind of, for everyone, just kind of start the process again from scratch for anyone who might be having trouble. And so I started with a plane right here, and with a plane, it starts off with, I think 10 subdivisions in each direction. So I go to the attribute editor. I brought it down to 1. Went over to the attribute editor, the first tab, and then rotated the first by axis by 90 degrees to get it flat with the rest of the scene. Press the W button to move it into position. Press F to focus in on it. I'm going full screen on my orthographic view because I don't care about my perspective view for this technique, at least at this point in time. And then from here, I right click, go to vertex mode, and I just use the W tool to kind of manually move my vertices around into position. So, and when I'm selecting the vertices, I'm grabbing a region like that, and then pressing W to get my move tool, and just kind of getting this in the approximate position right here. And so I had that, press Q, I right click and go to edge mode, and then I highlight this edge red or select that edge, and then go to the modeling toolkit, extrude, and then just use the arrow just to bring it straight out right there. Press Q to get out of it. Then right click, back to vertex mode, and then I'm just manually kind of moving these vertices back into position just by grabbing regions right there and then pressing W or pressing this move tool button right there. And again, in the orthographic view, you don't have to limit yourself to these handles right here. when you're working in the perspective mode, definitely always use these arrows right here. But when you're in the orthographic view, it's okay just to use the center region right here and just kind of move it this way. So I'm just kind of moving it like this. And I'm kind of averaging it out. It's okay if it's not exact. You see, I'm not using a ton of geometry here right now. So I have that in position. I'm going to right click. Oops. And you can see if I right click over the my reference image, you might get this window right here. So you just be sure to right click over your object and edge mode. So I'm going to repeat that process till I get to the bottom right here. So just selecting that edge, extrude, just using that arrow to get it out of there a little bit. And I'm just trying to approximately evenly space these out a little bit, but it just, it's not an exact science here because we're going to add more edge loops and stuff later on. But one thing you'll notice is that you see how my edges right here, they're kind of fanning out in the direction that this thing is kind of shifting its shape right here. So I don't want this edge right here. So this edge right that I have selected right here, I want it to be kind of like going along with the flow of the model a little bit. And so what I mean by that is I don't want this vertex to be like, that or like that, where it's like really far, like this edge is really long right here and then it's really close right there. Typically you want it to just be like evenly spaced, through your model right here. So just repeating this process again and again. So select that edge, press extrude, just an arrow to get it extended away from the rest of the edge, right click, vertex, select the vertex, and then kind of move it in the direction you want it to go. And remember in the perspective view, which I'm not using at all for any of this, I'm just modeling a flat object right now. We'll make it 3D in a moment. So just extending that out, right click, edge, select an edge right there, extrude, green arrow, Q, right click, vertex. And I might give this lower section 2 subdivisions. Okay, and so one last one. So I'm going to select this edge right here, extrude, green arrow, and Q, right click, vertex, and I'll roughly position these. And here's a really helpful thing is you see how this edge is at an angle right now, like it's not going, it's not horizontal to the ground right here. So there's a really easy trick that you can do to get this 100% horizontal to the ground without like manually trying to eye it, by bringing it down like this, although eyeing it is usually pretty close right there, is if you select this vertex right here and then hold shift and drag and select the other one. Oops, I need to actually hold shift. So you see I have this vertex and this vertex selected at the same time. If I use the scale tool, which is this button right here, or you press R, and you see this handle right here that's going up and down to scale it vertically. If I just take that handle right there that usually scales things vertically and pull it up, it flattens it out and it locks in the position where it gets like flat to the ground right there. So give that a shot right there. That's a helpful tip, and that'll be useful for other things down the road right here. So you say I have a vertex that's like, let's get it to almost like a 45-degree angle right here. So I have a vertex right here, hold shift, drag and select the second vertex, press R. And then if I do the scale handle that's going vertically from the bottom and scale it up, you can see it is overlapping my other geometry right now, but it goes flat right there. Make sure your geometry doesn't overlap, by the way. Try to keep it clean, like it was kind of overlapping like that. And you can see that it's overlapping by if edges are crossing, or if the X-ray kind of changes tone right in here. So if that happens, just be sure to kind of drag it away from itself a little bit. And so hopefully you should end up with something that looks approximately like this. So I did this with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 extrusions total. Yeah.
Look at the bottom, like
Yeah. So everyone give that a shot, and then yeah, I'll come back around.
I think I know what I think.
Okay.
see, 'cause instead of that flat thing, I did it like.
So what I would do, so that's not a problem. So what I would do is just kind of, this is called topology, like the shape of the flow of your geometry is essentially, that's when I say topology, that's what I mean.
Okay.
And so this all looks good. And so let's start with this vertex. So grab that one. All right, so hopefully everybody's looks, something approximately like this. So the plan overall is, so it should look something like this. And if you press 3, you can see it kind of round out and it's getting close to being the right shape right there. I'll press 1 to get back to the normal mode again. So to kind of begin to fill in the geometry a little bit more before we extrude this into a three-dimensional object, I'm going to want to use the multi-cut tool again to create some more edge loops. So looking at this is, I mean, it's pretty close. Like when I press 1, that's not bad. So maybe, or sorry, when I press 3, it's not bad. So I'll press 3 and then just kind of make a few adjustments to this here. It's just kind of fine tuning it. Just really small adjustments, I'm not doing anything even remotely major right there. And I mean, this is honestly in pretty decent shape here, but
Can you do that again?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you do what you did again to make it smooth?
Oh yeah, it's just the number 3 if you press it. So it'll,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it'll kind of smooth it out a little bit. So one thing to be careful about though, when you press 3, is it can be a little deceiving. So like I had it up here and then I pressed 3 and it looks right, but then it's like way up there. So to help avoid that a little bit, it's good to maybe add in a little more geometry in some key areas. I kind of was a little deceived down there as well. So to add more geometry, I'll just go into objects mode. And then I'll click the multi-cut tool right here. So that's the modeling toolkit. And then if you hold down Control, you get an edge loop option. So if you click the multi-cut tool again, you get the slicing tool, which will be helpful down the road, but it's not helpful right now. So you want to hold down Control on your keyboard, and then it'll create an edge loop like that. Press you see I still have my X-Acto knife from the multi-cut tool, so I press Q to go back to my normal selection. And I'm just going to add a few more pieces of maybe a few more few more edge loops just to add a little more geometry into this thing. So I just added an edge loop and then I right clicked and I went to vertex mode and then just kind of repositioned it right there. So this should go pretty quick because you can see how close. So this is kind of boils back down to the philosophy of modeling in low geometry that you're first passed through, because you see how little adjustments I needed to make so I created that multi-cut, and then I just had to move my vertices just a little bit right there. So the idea here is that once you get this base, like this, what I call like the Nintendo 64 level down, kind of adding that next level of geometry goes really quick. So it's I'll add an edge loop right here. So it's the multi-cut. I'll hold Control, click right there, and then I'll press Q to get the X-Acto knife to go away and go to my normal selection mode. Then I'm in vertex mode, and you can see right here, it's just like this pretty small adjustments I'm needing to make right there. And one trick here is you don't want to go too overboard with this. This is kind of like, this is a lot of geometry, honestly, that I'm doing right here. So you don't want to go overboard. It's just kind of like these areas like this where you just need a little bit more where we're doing that. And the multi-cut tool works whether you're in object mode or vertex mode. So I'm just holding down Control, clicking, just a normal left click. I press Q and I'm already in vertex mode. And you just need to press W to go to the move tool to just reposition these vertices a little bit. And you can see it's just pretty minor adjustments that I'm making along the way right here. And I'm trying to avoid this being jagged, and what I mean by jagged is I mean kind of like a in out kind of thing. Like you want it to be a continuous line that you're making here to match what we're doing. And let's see here. So this is already looking pretty good, but I might need a little bit more. We're largely just kind of going by eye and feel a little bit on this. So I took these edges and kind of moved them up a little bit. So there's a little bit of back and forth that you do. And then I'm gonna do one more just for this bottom area right here. So, and this will kind of bring us to where we need to be right here. So multi-cut tool, hold control, let it go, zoom in. I need to get rid of my multi-cut tool. So I press Q, which is the selection tool right there. Then I right click, make sure I'm in vertex mode. And then I just make any more minor adjustments I need to make on this right here. And this is looking pretty good right here. So by the end, the shape should look something like that. And you can see, like, I was going kind of slow there too. Like, once you get that first subdivision level down, like the second round, you know, accelerates. It gets a lot quicker right there. And again, you don't need to go crazy with the geometry. This is like, honestly, this is a little heavy. I think, like you don't want it to be any more than that really. And so if I press 3, you get a preview of what it'll look like smooth. And so when I press 3, you can see it kind of gets that shape right there. 1 is back to where we were, 3 is smooth. And so anyway, it's just kind of, you know, you're doing most of the work on that first round of work where we're just moving the vertices, extruding the edge, moving the vertices. And I'm just using that, again, I just kind of use the multi-cut tool in that pass just to kind of smooth it out a little bit, you know, so that when I press 3, it's just getting a little bit closer to the original object right there. And so once you have your shape traced right here, is all you need to do is, I think you can do this from object mode, but I think it's a good habit to go into face mode here. So we can go into perspective view right here, and you just get there by pressing this button right here. And just right click and go to face mode right here. So hold down right click, go to face. Select all your faces at the same time right there. So I'm just dragging from the top left corner, dragging all the way down, down to there. And then all I'm doing is I'm just pressing extrude right here. And so I extrude it, and then you can pull it one of two directions. So for me, I'm doing the blue arrow to move it front or back. And if you drag it one way, your object might appear black. If your object appears black, that's not the end of the world. There's actually a really quick fix to solve that. But it's also just easier to solve it in this case just by dragging it the other direction so that it appears kind of gray right there. And so we're just kind of turning this into a 3-dimensional object right here. So let me just kind of go back to where I was. So we have our object traced out right there. That's in one mode right there. And then I just right click, go to face mode right here, select, drag and select all your faces right there. Just press extrude. And then in my case, it's going to be the blue arrow. It might be different for you if you loaded this into a different orthographic view, but for most of you, it should be the blue arrow, and you just pull it forward right here. If it appears black, there's a quick fix for that. But just, you want it to kind of go this way right here so that it's gray right there. And so you just kind of pull it forward, and our visual reference doesn't really give us an idea of how thick these are. So I'm just going to kind of eye it a little bit. I think that looks okay. And so I'll press Q once that's in there. And so there's still some work I need to do, because when I press 3, you can see this is a little noodly right now. And so I need to create some bevels to give this a little bit of a harder edge on this thing. But before I show that, if your model is appearing black at any point here like that, let's just say it's like this. So for anyone who might run into this, where your object is appearing black, or any area of the object is appearing black, what that means is that it's inside out, is all that really means, which does become a problem in texturing. So to fix it, it's actually really easy. You just select your model and then you go to where is it? Mesh display and then reverse right there. So that just flips it back inside out. So it's mesh display and then reverse. And then that moves it right back into a normal object right there.
Does that also flip normals?
It's this is just faces right here. Normals, I'm not it might. I'm not sure. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think that's right. So we reverse it and it's right there. And so again, so when I press 3, this looks a little noodly right now. So it's kind of the same philosophy of what we were doing with the rest of the table right here, where we're creating some more edge loops to kind of give this some definition around the edges right there. So in order to do that, I'm gonna kind of go back to the same techniques right here. And again, I was just pressing H right there to hide it. That doesn't delete these models, it just hides them out of the way. So probably there's a few ways to fix that. I think the easiest way to fix it right here is, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select all the faces on this side and then all the faces on this side and bevel them, but I'm not gonna have these faces selected. And so what that's gonna do is it's gonna create a bevel that goes kind of around that edge all the way around. And then a bevel, an identical bevel that goes around that edge all the way around. But you can see if I do the edge mode, it doesn't select all the way around. We could really do it either way. So sorry, I'm not trying to be confusing with that. Yeah. Which part do you need? Like the. Oh yeah, yeah. So to do that, so sorry, I got a little I fell on my words a little bit there. So select all your faces right here, and don't bevel yet, but we're going to select all of our faces on your whole object, and then go to your 4 view. And what we're looking for is either the top or the side view right there. I'm going to use the top view. So I'm going to go into the top view. And I'm going to zoom in on my object. So you can press F to zoom in on your object. And what you want to do is, so you want to deselect these faces that are right here in the sandwiched in the middle. So I'm just holding Control to deselect, and then I'm just making a small little selection right here through the middle, right there, to deselect those faces. I'll press spacebar. And so what I did here is I selected all the faces on this side right here, and then all the faces on that side right there, but you can see none of the faces are selected that are kind of sandwiched in between right there. So just to show that again, is I'm in right clicking, go into face mode, drag and select so that I get the whole object. Then you could, oops, you might be able to like hold Control and double click like that to deselect right there. So that technique also works, but the one that works more consistently. So again, you can just hold Control, click, double click while holding Control to deselect that edge loop right there. But I think the easier way is just to tap spacebar, go into your 4 view mode, oops, hold Control, and then just do like a narrow, so while holding Control, just do this narrow deselection of those objects in the middle, or those faces in the middle. And that'll get it selected like that. And then from here, I'll press bevel. And so what it's going to do is it's going to bevel going around these faces right here. And then it's going to create an identical bevel around those faces right there. And so I'll just press bevel, and you can see it kind of creates a lot of our shape right there. And then I'm just going to take this, I'm going to make some adjustments. So maybe 0.4 for the fraction. And I might bring the segments up to 2. Remember that you can click off of this and go back to this mode and then press 3 and kind of see how it's looking. And remember that with this object selected, since I haven't deleted history, I can go to the attribute editor. And remember the attribute editor, these tabs are like your modeling actions that you've done. So the furthest bevel to the left, I can kind of have 3 selected and make small adjustments to the bevel I did. If I want it to be like a sharper bevel right here with like more segments in it, I can just move those sliders around. So now it's got like a really sharp bevel right there. Or again, I can just kind of make it a little more gradual. Like that. The number of segments has a direct correlation with how kind of rigid the edges are. So again, this is it in 1 mode, and then I'm pressing 3 to see it in 3 mode. And I'm able to kind of just make adjustments to the bevel that I already created through those controls right there. So that's essentially how you make that. I'll just kind of go back. I'm pressing edit undo a lot. So I'm just going to show it one more time here. Okay. So yeah, y'all give it a try, and for anyone who's kind of wants to see it again. So again, I'm kind of back to where I had my flat object. You can see the front's gray, the back is black. So that's kind of like the inside out thing. So I'm just right clicking, going to face mode, selecting all my faces, going down to modeling toolkit and extrude. Oops, make sure you're in 1 mode. 3 mode can get weird. And bring the arrow forward so your object is gray instead of pitch black, and then press Q to get out of that. And now, so what we're going to do is we're going to create the bevel on either side. And so to do that, we're going to remain in face mode. I'm going to select all the faces. Then I'm going to tap spacebar or press this button right here to go to 4 view. And then I'll hold Control, deselect this kind of sandwich area in between. So now you can see that the front faces and the back faces are selected right there. Then I'm just going to press bevel right here. And it creates a bevel around those faces that were selected. And so, oh no, oops, I messed up. Sorry about that, my hand slipped. So I just pressed edit undo until I got back to where I was. Face mode, selected them all, Control, deselect, then press bevel. And from here, remember you can make adjustments to this. So 0.4 maybe, give it another segment. But remember, you can just always press Q. My computer's going a little slow. There we go. You can always press through Q or press the select button right here to kind of get out of the extrude mode, and press 3 to kind of see how you're doing. And remember that as long as history is not deleted, you can go to the attribute editor and look for the first tab to the left that says bevel. And while 3 is still kind of highlighted, we can continue to make adjustments to this to either kind of make that edge a little more rigid like that, or make it a little softer. And you do that with a combination of the fraction, which is the size of the bevel, and then the segments, which is the number of kind of creases or geometry within the bevel. So you can see right here, this is with a fraction that's really large and then a low number of segments that's very gradual. And if I take the segments up to 2, you can see it automatically gets more rigid. And then as I take the size, oops, and make it smaller, right there, it gets pretty stiff in there. So it's just like 3, more gradual right there. So maybe like 2 and 0.4, pretty decent. It just kind of depends on what you're going for on this thing. There we go. I'm just kind of using my eye looking at the reference. I feel like something along the lines of like 0.4-ish in 2 segments is probably pretty good. And so from here, like you pretty much have it. It's if you want, so this is pretty rounded at the bottom and over here on the edge. The edge isn't really going to matter that much because it's going to be covered up by the table once we kind of move it into its final position here. But if this is like a mental exercise, if we want to kind of make this a little bit more of a hard edge right there, is you just press 1. And we'll just use the multi-cut tool to kind of create an edge loop that goes right along there. And so keep in mind, so this is what it looks like right now when I press 3. And so now if I do the modeling toolkit and I use the multi-cut tool right here and hold Control to create an edge loop, and I'm going to put that edge loop as close as I can to the edge right here and let it go. And so I just created this edge loop right there. with the multi-cut tool just by holding control and doing a normal click. And now when I press 3, you see that edge is a lot more abrupt right there. So you can do that for the side right there, and you can do that for the bottom down here. So I'll press 1 to get back to my normal viewing mode again. And then down here, I'll do the multi-cut tool, hold control, and just adding in one edge loop. That's all you need is one edge loop, kind of close in there. And the edge loop's right there. And if I press 3, you can see that bottom edge is become a lot more like abrupt at the bottom, you know, where before it was rounded. One tool that I really like a lot, which I'm just gonna, so you don't need this tool right now, but I'm just gonna go ahead and introduce it for anyone who's interested, it's called the Slide Edge tool, and I actually like this tool a whole lot. And what the Slide Edge tool does is, if you have your geometry drawn on, and you just want to like shift an edge over, without changing the shape of things, you know, because right now, if I want to take this edge, let's say that I have this edge too close to that edge, and I want it to just be further out this way. If I try to move it physically, it's going to change the shape of my model, you know, in a way that's going to be really hard to deal with if I try to physically move it. And so a tool that can be really helpful to just to slide an edge around your model a little bit while maintaining the general integrity of your model, is you select an edge like this, and then it's under, so we have to go under a menu to find this, but it's Mesh Tools. And under Mesh Tools is called the Slide Edge tool right here. So we're just going to slide the edge around a little bit. And so it's Mesh Tools and then Slide Edge. And what you have to do is you'll click it, and then you'll have to use your middle mouse button to slide the edge around. So a normal click won't work. So it's Mesh Tools, Slide Edge. You see drag with MMB to slide message comes up. And so what I'm doing now is I don't click anything with my normal click, and I just do a middle mouse drag, and you can see if it'll let me, this might be too small. So I'm just dragging left to right. If you drag up and down, it'll really shift a lot. But if you drag subtly left to right, you can kind of move your edge around a little bit. And you see how if you keep your eye on the outside of the model, do you notice how the outside of the model is not changing its shape at all? So you're just kind of it's a way to shift your geometry around, while minimally changing your model right there. And so where that becomes really advantageous is, so now that edge is a little bit further away from the border now, or this lower edge right there. And so now when I press 3, it's more rounded right here. And so now I'll press 1, and then I'll do the Slide Edge tool again. So double click that edge, and then it's Mesh Tools down to Slide Edge right here. Then it's drag with your middle mouse button to slide it. So I'm dragging left to right. Up and down doesn't work very well. So you have to drag left to right, holding down your middle mouse button. Then I'll press Q, object mode. And now when I press 3, it's just more of like a abrupt edge down there. And that Slide Edge tool is going to become helpful in like more advanced modeling right there. But I just wanted to go ahead and kind of, you know, show that and kind of introduce that concept while it's sitting right there. So hopefully at this point you have a model that looks something like this. And I'll just call this leg 1 right here. And I can unhide my group right there. Maybe I'll just drag it. Oops. So you might have to so to move something in and out of a group, you have to, just clicking it and dragging does a selection like this. So you have to click it, and then similar to the Slide Edge tool, you need to do the middle mouse button, and you see a little plus sign comes up, and now I can just drag it into my group right there. And so you can see it's now in the table group, and I can move my group around uniformly right here. Let's see here. And so from here, I'm just going to manually kind of shift this into position. You know, it might be good to hide my tabletop and look at this from the top view, just to kind of get this right into the right spot right here. And we probably could mess around with like duplicate special or something to kind of get this to duplicate our leg into 4 legs right here. So you remember duplicate special was that way that we could like duplicate primitive objects in kind of creative ways. We can also use it to duplicate something like this leg 4 times, just kind of by 90-degree axes. Or, I mean, if you don't want to deal with that, you could just duplicate it 4 times. So press Command D and then press the rotate button and then hold J and then rotate 90 degrees, you know, and you could manually kind of put it into position, right? So you don't have to use duplicate special, but it might be worth a shot here. And in order to do the duplicate special, it might be good to introduce one more concept to you all. So I'm going to press H right here to hide this. So do you see when I my arrows for my move tool right here are right here on my object? So it's kind of in the center of my object. Sometimes you're going to want to move what's called your anchor point to different positions right here. And so there's some important shortcuts here. So if you click D as in dog, you can move the anchor point around right here. So I can kind of shift my anchor point to kind of be along the edge like that. Or I can, move it to the, you know, more of the center of my object like that. And then if you press D again, your anchor point is now shifted. And so now when I rotate, it rotates from that axis. If I press D again, and I move it all the way out here, and I press rotate, it's now going to rotate from this axis right there. So that's what that anchor point means, is that it's just the axis that it's going to rotate or scale from. And so what I'm going to do here is there's another helpful shortcut on this, which you press D as in dog to shift the anchor point. And I'm going to shift this to my top view right here so we can see this better. So there's 2 shortcuts that are really helpful. If you hold V, it snaps your anchor point along the outside of your model right here. So V as in vampire snaps it to your model along the outer edges. But what I want is X as in Xerox, and if I hold X, I can snap it. It snaps to the grid. So I'm holding X and it snaps right here, and I hold X and it snaps right to the actual absolute center point of my entire scene right there. So just to kind of show this again, I have my anchor point, which was initially here on my model. And then I want to duplicate special where I rotate it 90 degrees each time. So for 4 copies, and I want it to rotate around the center of my scene, because my table, if we unhide my table, is oops, wrong one. If I unhide my table, it's right in the center of my scene right there. And so if I set this anchor point in the middle and I duplicate it 4 times and rotate it 90 degrees, it'll stay on axis, right, and be symmetrical here. So I'm going to hide that. So again, to show this is, so you just press the move tool, and then the shortcut is D as in dog will help you move your anchor point. And you could just do this by eye. But you can see when you press D, it's a loose move. You know, you can move it. It's like a free transform that you can do for moving it. But if you hold down X, and so you just have to hold down X and it snaps to the grid right here, and you can snap it right to the middle. Then when you're done, you press W right there to move the anchor point to the middle. And so now when you rotate your object, it is now rotating from this point right here, rather than within the object right there. Does that make sense to everybody, what I'm saying right there? Yes. Okay, yeah, let me, yeah, so everyone try to do this technique where you take your leg, and your anchor point might be somewhere over here, and try pressing D. So you only press D, you don't need to hold it. And so your view should change like that. Oops. And then if you hold down X, you should be able to snap it. But remember, you want to be in your top view when you snap it. So switch to your top view and hold down X while it's in that mode, and then snap your anchor point right to the middle of your scene, and then you'll be good right there. Oh, did you? Okay, nice. Anyone else experiencing any problems? Oh, I turned my chat off. I need to turn that back on. Okay, let's see here. Pia, is your top view still giving you?
I fixed it. It's okay.
Okay, gotcha. Is that going okay for everyone online? The changing of the anchor point? Okay. Let's see here. I'm gonna just go around the classroom. And take a quick look.
How do I unhide something?
Oh, so you have to find it in the outliner and then click it in the outliner and then press H.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yo.
Nice.
I made that thing go.
That's good.
I have to do something.
Nice. That's all in here.
Let's try, if we, and it looks even better, so, this is so good. See, look how good this is. When you just. So good. Awesome. I think that they will still mildly know about this, but.
Oh. Probably. Alright. Okay, well, I should have. Let's see, where's the panels? It's right there. I'm trying to work it out. Bottom. And so, we're nearing the end of this right here. So, so we're nearing the end of this, and all we need to do now is just duplicate this, I guess 3 more times, so four copies total. So I'm just gonna select this and then go to edit, duplicate special, and then go to this pop-up window right there. So I have my legs selected, and then I go up to that menu that I have selected up there, which is you go up to the top where it says edit, then you go down to duplicate special. Then you go to the pop-up window right here, which is like the options window. So I'll click on that. And what do we have here? So I want 3 copies. And I don't want it to move. I just need it to rotate. So X, Y, Z. I'm really bad at this. I think it'll be this one. So I'm going to try out one of these rotate options. And I'm going to set it to 90 degrees. And I'll probably got this wrong, but I'll press apply and see. Yep, that went wrong. Let's see here. Let me edit undo. What did I do wrong there? If duplicate special doesn't work for me, there's another thing I can do to get this to work. 3 copies.
If it's 3 legs, you can try doing it at 120 degrees instead of 90, because I think it's trying to form a square because of that.
I'm not sure. What? Okay. So, okay, let's forget about duplicate special because I'm having some kind of brain fart here on. But if we have leg 1 right here, so we don't have to do duplicate special. We can just press Command D, or go to edit normal duplicate right here. So we can see we have a duplicate leg that's one right on top of the other. And so now if I press E as in rotate right there, and then I hold down J so that it rotates by 15-degree increments, it'll just rotate into place right there by 90 degrees right there. So I was having trouble with duplicate special, but this is just as good right here. So I'll just select this leg right here. Then I'll go down to edit and then just plain old duplicate right here. It'll duplicate right on top of itself. Then I will press the rotate button and then hold down J as in joystick and then just rotate it, and it snaps by 15-degree increments right here. And so just snap it to another 90 degrees. And then final one right here. And you can press Command D, that's the shortcut for this. So if you press Command D or Control D, that's another way to just do a regular duplicate. And then again, just holding J and rotating 90 degrees. And then we got our 4 legs right there. Let's see here. And so if you do that, you should have 4 legs. And I have my tabletop and my columns hidden. So I can just select those and press H. And now we have a table where the legs are fully 90 degrees apart from each other on the rotation. And it's kind of looking about right here. So let me hide these one more time. And I'm just gonna delete my initial my legs right here. So just to kind of step through what I did right there is my my leg started like that. I pressed D and it'll change like this, and that makes it so you can change your anchor point. I switch to the top view. I hold down X and then snap it to the center of the scene right there. And from here, I'll just go press Command D. And notice that I named this leg 1. So when it duplicates, it'll duplicate in a way that's natural, where it'll be leg 2, leg 3, leg 4, right there. So edit, duplicate, or Command or Control D. And then you just rotate it by pressing this button right here, or pressing E. Then hold J and snap it by 90 degrees. Command D, E, and then hold J, rotate by 90 degrees. Command D, and then E.
Are you supposed to hold D?
Oh, so D, you just press it once.
Okay, I
Yeah.
tried doing that. I was like, did my entire thing.
On the-
I did my selection.
Yeah, so wait, yeah, that's a good question. So right here, when you're changing your anchor point around, just when you go into the changing anchor point mode, which is D, just press it once and don't hold it. Which is a little confusing because you do hold X when you're snapping it to the grid. And when you press X, it's snapping it to this grid right here. That's like by centimeters. That's what kind of that grid that starts out in your scene right there. And so hopefully your scene should look something like this. And yeah, when you press H on these, they should kind of like when they're smoothed out, they should kind of look about right, hopefully. And let me just quickly put some lighting on this. Sometimes I like to put like some really basic lighting on stuff just to see if it's looking okay. It's a good way to kind of double check things. And this is a Lambert shader on this, so it's not going to look like totally awesome or anything, but you can see it's looking okay. And so I created a Skydome light, and I think I must have, oh yeah, and I created a area light before. So I just created a Skydome and a quick area light just so I could kind of test if my model's looking okay. And so in the Skydome light, I didn't even put an HDRI on it. It's just projecting light in every direction. And sometimes when you're just like testing a model real quick, just to make sure it looks okay, you don't need to kind of go into like some exquisite lighting situation right here. But you can see right here that I have the model in 3 right there. And if I select it and press 1, you can see that can you see that faceting that's happening right there along the edges right there? So this is this leg in 1 mode, and then if I press 3, it smooths it out. So the smooth is not just a preview, it actually kind of comes out in the renders when you do that. So 1, 3 right there. And so just kind of make sure that you have your whole model selected, because like this column right here in 1 mode for me on my particular model doesn't look awesome in 1 mode. But again, if you press 3, it should hopefully, if things kind of went right, it should look okay. So let me just press 3 on all these. And so that's basically how you model a table like this. And you'd be surprised how many different things you can model with these, like these concepts that I'm showing right here. Basically, the way that I modeled these legs, where I model it flat and then I extrude it out, there's another level of complexity to add on top of this. But essentially, when I'm looking at an object that I need to model and I really don't know what I need to do to tackle it, this is kind of my catch-all kind of way to model something, especially when it gets like really complicated right there. But again, when I'm modeling characters, it's a variation of this version right here. So it's this is hopefully like a good foundation for us to build on in terms of modeling whatever you need for your scene here. So for the rest of the class, I'll just let y'all work on this and just flag me down if you have any problems, or if you have any questions for me on any of this. Yeah, let's see here. Let me just real quick.